School's first federal credit union and hosted through our Cal State Fullerton Center for Creativity and Critical Thinking. So first, I just want to start out by thanking you for coming today and investing this time on your Saturday morning into your professional development and into learning some new things that you can put into play into your classroom to help your students develop more social emotional competence. All right, I will turn it over to Tanaz to give us kind of an overview of social emotional learning.
So I want to share this image for us. It's going to be broken down in the next slide. So this is just a quick visual of social emotional learning. We have 5 different sections. So self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-management. So all of these are targets of SEL, and all of them work together. So that's why they're in this as a unit. And then we'll go to the next slide. It breaks it down into easy to read, like little pieces. So if we pull these pieces apart, we can identify them and see what we can target in the classroom. So if you see on the corner bottom, I'm going to start there with the circle image of SEL. And notice the darkest ring is the classroom, the blue ring. And then that leads into the school community, school culture is the ring that goes above that. And then outside, the largest ring is homes and communities. So we'll be touching base on each of these and how they affect SEL, what it means if one of these is not supporting or is not as strong as the others, and how we can identify those gaps and what we can do to better support our students in those areas. Today, we're going to just zoom into relationship skills. That's our goal today, is to discuss communication, social engagement, how to target relationship building in the classroom, and how to really bring teamwork and student culture and their excitement to work together.
Okay, so this is just kind of what we're going to cover this morning. We are going to give you time to ask any questions that you may have. We have 2 Q&As built into our presentation. So one at kind of the halfway point or so, and then one at the end. So if you have questions, you are welcome to go ahead and put them in the chat so you don't forget them, and then we'll check the chat at the Q&A, or you can just wait until the Q&A and go ahead and ask out loud. And please remain muted unless you are asking a question or sharing something. And then once Tanaz is talking about her next slide, I'm going to start uploading some links in the chat. I will share our Google slide link to our Google Slides. And in the Google Slides, you will find several hyperlinks to some of the things that we'll be talking about. And yeah, so just kind of check the chat from time to time, and I will share some links. Okay. All right, so I want to just open up with the importance of social emotional competence. From research, we know that students who are competent in social and emotional skills have better mental health. There are very strong connections here, strong correlations to better mental health, higher self-esteem, better, more positive social activity, and a higher probability of meaningful employment in adulthood, meaning employment that feels good, that you can earn a living and support yourself, and you feel like you are contributing something meaningful to your life through your employment. But students with social and emotional and behavioral difficulties tend to experience higher levels of peer and teacher rejection, negative relationships with teachers and peers, lower self-esteem and social withdrawal, increased depression, anxiety, and loneliness, and decreased job functioning or vocational functioning. And if not addressed, then these challenges can result in underemployment, meaning maybe they have a job, but it's 3 or 4 hours a day, and it's really not enough to be independent and pay all the bills, or just unemployment. And I'll hand it over to Tanaz to talk about this one.
So with our SEL system of change, so just to have an overview, I really think that this quote is important. I'm going to read it for us. Knowledge and skills that children acquire through social and emotional related education, instruction, activities, or promotion, efforts that help them recognize and manage their emotions. So that's the biggest piece, is managing emotions, engaging in responsible decision making, and establishing positive relationships. All three of those align with the child in regards to how they're learning in class, how they're perceiving others in class, how they recognize emotions of others, how they understand their own emotions. All these pieces are really great in this visual right here that we see on the right. And you can see that the positive school climate has a huge effect on how the child is successful at school, as well as their productivity, their social and emotional skills, their friendships that they make, their system of supports. The one in orange, I think that that's a huge one. I feel like a lot of my students, and I've witnessed in the past, that you already can tell right from the beginning if they have a good system of support or they may have some gaps in their system of support. So focusing on these areas, and I think that if you have some time, just go back to this visual and read it for yourself and kind of just digest with this and sit with it and see what really just comes into your mind at first. Because when I first saw this visual, it really like hit me hard. I was like, whoa, I feel like everyone should see this. Everyone should be looking at this, and making sure that some of these pieces at least are highlighted if they haven't been yet. So I love this one. Some challenges for our 2021-2022 school year. So currently, relating back to our SEL standards, you see that image that we had shown you beforehand. This is something that I just call my SEL standards. It's not like it's in the California Common Core standards, but I, for myself, just remind myself like this is the template of how I want to create SEL in my classroom. So some challenges after returning from the pandemic include communicating with adults. So some students are really struggling with sharing their needs, or they might be a little bit more shy, or they're a little bit more reserved due to some pandemic shifts at home and at school. As well as expressing their emotions. I see a lot of highs and a lot of lows. There's just a bunch of ups and downs. Some days are really great with certain students, and some days they're just going back and forth. Self-control when socializing and with peers in class. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but my kids are so chatty. They're so happy to be back. They can't wait to see their friends. They're like mingling all the time. And we do remind them like, hey, this is one of our school goals, is to have self-control. So allowing them to be expressive when they want to, allowing them to be communicating with their friends, but they also have to be aware that there's a specific time and place. Following school norms. So this ties into the one below the second one, that's school routines. So school norms, of course, is all the school rules, but then school routines in general has to do with the schedules that they have to follow, because I work at a middle school setting. So they have 6 different teachers that they see. There's only 4 minutes passing period. They have to go to the bathroom during passing period. They have to get water. They have to make it on time. A lot of the kids that I work with are 6th graders. So they're brand new to the campus, and school routines are like, what does this mean? What do I have to do this? So they have a lot of questions. So you have to get prepared for that. Um, Assignment completion. I'm sure we've all experienced this. A lot of us know about this one. Just wanted to add that to this slide. That's something that teachers are aware of, but I also want to mention that teacher expectations also need to meet the reality of the pandemic. I'm not calling out any specific teachers or people or whoever, but I do notice that some teachers understand that they need to give students grace. Other teachers are just chugging along like the pandemic is fine and we can still do the same things that we used to do. But in my opinion, I don't think that students are ready for that, just going back into it. They need those baby steps. They need that motivation, especially for our special education students. In order to advocate for my students, I do mention that to my general education teachers, like, hey, like all these kids weren't here. All these kids don't have this routine. Some of the expectations, I think we need to reconsider them. I know that you have goals for your students and I have goals for them as well. So how can we like meet in the middle to make sure that they're not stressed out of their mind and they're not panicking because they can't meet the expectations of your classroom. So that ties into stress about academic performance. That's the biggest thing that I see my students struggle with right now is all they want to say is, I can't do this. This is too much for me. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore, because they are technically like in a fourth, fifth grade mindset, and they're fully now physically sixth graders, but mentally they have to meet themselves where they're at. So we have some ideas that we'd like to share that ties back into our SEL standards. So teachers, aides, staff support on campus, the best way to just start is by addressing the challenges from the pandemic early on. The sooner you can share, like, hey, we're going to even have a lesson today about what happened when we weren't at school. What are some things that we now have to deal with at school? And how can students understand like that shift from at home studying and the expectations at home to now the expectations at school, and allowing them to have that like moment of the aha moment of, oh yeah, like you're right, Miss O, that totally happened to me, or my brother experienced this but I didn't. So having them think on their own of the challenges is really useful, for them to have that awareness, that identifying piece of, yeah, that really sucked, I didn't like that, or oh, this was really cool, maybe we can try this in the classroom, I really liked taking a break, and having them offer ideas. The next one, incorporating SEL lessons, activities into daily curriculum. Yes, we have to follow Common Core standards, but we do have a lot of opportunities to incorporate SEL in activities. So I'm excited to share some of those later on, and we'll talk about that near the end of our webinar. Modeling how to appropriately express needs and emotions. So this is a good tactic that you can share with your aides as well, because I have one aide that I work closely with and she knows most of my students. She's with me almost 3 or 4 class periods. And sorry, my dog keeps barking. I don't know if you can hear him. And it's a way for adults to have our own emotional regulation, our own self-awareness of our emotions. And of course we have a mask on, but our tone is very, very necessary to make sure that we're maintaining a tone, because students still hear us. They can't really see what's going on under here, but they definitely feel it. And I think that that's a huge piece. So I do make sure that I'm watching myself in those moments and thinking before I'm speaking. Um, Being patient. So that's just the key. It's one of my like mantras I tell myself every day. In order to guide your students to be successful in their school norms and their school routines, you also have to be patient with yourself and with them. If they're not able to have self-control, if they're not able to meet you at that place they need to be, it's not your fault and it's not their fault. They just need a break or they need time. And having that awareness of that patience is key. Um, the next one, lessening your expectations. Like I had mentioned before, they have so much pressure from all different angles, new environments, new people, new teachers, uh, some home life situations that have shifted. Maybe some family members are not working yet, maybe they are working. Everything is always different and changing. So there is not really a consistency that they have had for almost 2 years. We haven't had that for 2 years. So making sure that they know that they have a safe space in your classroom. You have specific expectations and you have consistency, and they're able to relax and be themselves in your classroom.
I just wanted to say, I think what you talked about, the mask and how it's covering up our face and our tone, is so important. That's just so huge, because the masks eliminate a very big part of our communication, which is our facial expressions. And so we're limited. And so our students have to go off of our tone. And if we have a tone that sounds like we're angry or it's very sharp, but they can't see our face, maybe we don't mean it to be that way, that might invoke some fear into our students. And when we feel fearful, we are less receptive to learning. So I thought, gosh, that's a really great point to make. So thank you for that. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the barriers to social to be aware of. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure you've seen this at some point or another. And basically the bottom tiers have to be met before you can kind of go up and worry about the next tiers. So social needs, as you can see, is here in the middle, right in the middle of the hierarchy. If a student's basic needs and safety needs are not being met, then it doesn't make sense to focus on the social needs so much just yet. If these are not being met, then these are just not even on the radar quite yet. So we can't control, we don't have control over all of it, but we can try to make sure that their basic needs are being met, at least while they're at school. And then if it does seem like the family's struggling, we can be offering resources, reaching out, keeping in, contact with the family to see if there's anything that we can offer to help in terms of resources. But we can also address this during school by allowing students to keep a water bottle at their desk if they're able to handle that. Maybe get a snack break or allowing some snacking in class if that's not too disruptive. If we can open up some windows and get some fresh air, things like that, to help them make sure that their basic needs are met. A student who's hungry is not going to be receptive or be able to listen to what you're saying or to what's going on in the class, because all that they're going to be able to think about is their hunger and their growling stomach. And then safety needs. We can also their need for safety at school by having clear rules and consequences and communicating that those rules and consequences are in place so that everybody can feel safe in the classroom and that everybody can learn. So helping them feel like you are protecting them from harm and from disruptions, from unsafe behaviors from others and even from themselves, can help them feel safe in the in the classroom so that then you're able to go ahead and really meet those social needs. Can I just ask, are you still seeing the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Can you guys give, are you
Yes, we
still
can.
able to see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I got a weird
Yeah, I can.
notification that said something. Perfect, thank you. And specifically, there are some barriers to social emotional learning for students with disabilities. And this is shown in the research. Now, of course, not all students with disabilities are going to experience all of these. Some students with disabilities might not have any of these barriers, and some might have several. But these are the barriers, these are the issues that come up consistently in research for students in general with disabilities. And these are recognizing emotions in themselves and others, specifically those emotions that go beyond happy, sad, and mad, the basics, right? We know that emotions can be a lot more nuanced than that. And many students with disabilities have a hard time recognizing that within themselves and recognizing those emotions within others. And that can certainly make it more difficult to have social emotional competence. Also regulating and managing strong emotions. So when Tanaz was talking earlier about students being really excited to see their friends again, they might actually be having a hard time regulating that excitement, and they might go a little bit overboard. We see that when students are really excited about an activity that we have planned, a fun activity, and they get so excited, they might not even be able to fully experience the activity because they're just over the top, running around or talking very loudly because they are not regulating that positive emotion of excitement so that they can participate. And likewise, I'm sure you've seen students who aren't able to regulate their anger. They become overly angry, and it's disruptive, and it's unsettling, and they're not able to engage in learning, or they're so upset about something that they just break down and cry for longer than if they were able to regulate that emotion, then they would be able to get it back together and then hold off until maybe they're in private, and then they can let it all out and finish out that emotion. They can also have a hard time recognizing their own strengths and their areas of need, and they also may complex emotions because they vary with some good social emotional learning activities and lessons. All right, and then Tanaz is going to talk about the impact of trauma on social emotional learning.
So I wanted to share this piece. I actually collaborated with my tier 3 counselor at my school, and she really wanted to address this. And I was like, I love this idea. And she said that more teachers and staff need to be aware of the trauma that may have occurred prior to you meeting your students or even present, and what you're able to do if that's the case. And this is, again, case by case, each student is unique. I'm able to communicate with my 2 school counselors on campus. I have one that's just a general school counselor, and then I was in touch with my tier 3. She deals with specific cases that are on the level of before we meet with principal and parents. So having a trauma-informed lens, just making sure as staff on campus that we're paying attention to our students' academic development, especially right now during the pandemic. They may have experienced extreme amounts of stress and related trauma that they haven't really digested, they have not fully come to terms with. They may have some extra baggage that's still happening at home or outside of the home, maybe in the community, or maybe with themselves personally that they haven't come to accept. So there are those things that we may hear, and some students are willing to share. Other students maybe don't want to share, or some students don't even know that this has happened to them and they don't know how to um, move forward with their trauma. So, taking this lens and giving ourselves also an understanding that this has happened to us as adults. So, how can we help our students who are various age groups and various home life and school life experiences? How can we focus our attention on producing a positive mood, producing a space that allows focus and concentration, positive behavior and emotions, a space that if students are struggling with recall, memory recall, that's something that's totally normal. And that's an expectation that I feel like as special educators, we need to express to our general education staff that all of these things are occurring, and they really just need to be able to trust the adults in the room in order to express any of these things that might pop up. And if they feel safe with you, they are more open and more willing to share. And understanding how trauma affects the brain and the body. So, in response to knowing that all of these incorporated, it has to do with the mind, the body, the emotions, and their development. I really see this year of our school year as we're learning just as much from our students as they are from us. And we need to keep that open communication and make sure that they feel respected, they feel valued, and they feel like we can trust them as well.
All right, so we'll go ahead and just pause for a moment. And are there any questions so far? I don't think any's popped up in the chat. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. And if there are no questions, that's okay too. All right, we'll keep going. Okay, so now we're going to get into the specifics of relationship building. And I'll let Tanaz talk about this slide. Yeah.
So I just want to give a little background of where I'm coming from as an instructor. So I work in the middle school setting. I'm an RSP teacher. So I do 6th grade co-teaching in the morning, followed by 8th grade co-teaching. And then I do a reading intervention program in the afternoon. So with this said, and experiencing these different types of environments, school dynamics, my co-teaching experience is so different from my reading intervention experience in the afternoon. I wanted to just highlight these 3 things that I think would be useful just in general in any type of special education setting, whatever that you're working with currently. Just instructing students to identify their emotions. So for example, we see the photo in the corner right, a student who it looks like they possibly fell, and there's another student who's helping them. Just making sure that if you see something like this, go ahead and address that. Like say we see Bobby is helping Joe and they're helping him get up. You could say like, hey, Bobby, that was so helpful. Thank you for noticing that Joe was hurt. Joe, like, are you okay? I think that Bobby helped you out. That was really awesome. And identifying just in general, like in the classroom setting, if kids are very frustrated or if they put their head down or if they are slouching and their eyes are half closed, you could just identify that instead of being like, hey, like, are you on task? Like, what happened? Just identifying the emotion first. You could say like, oh, it seems like you're having a hard time right now. Is everything okay? Or you could open up a conversation. I noticed that you have your head slanted and you're leaning sideways. Are you tired? Is there anything that you'd like to share? So opening up the conversation in an emotional lens instead of a lens of you're not on task or follow directions or keep going, and giving them that clarity of, oh yeah, I am slouching. Oh yeah, I do look kind of tired. Oh no, like I'm okay. I'm ready to learn. And if they're not ready, totally okay, right? We have to give them that space to be ready. Um, Vocabulary lists. I love this one. I think that vocabulary lists are really helpful as long as they're consistent. So I think consistency in like our entire presentation today is like my word you're going to hear me say a lot, because it's important to refer back to the vocab list. Yes, you can give them the list. Yes, it's on your classroom walls. Yes, you have lessons about it, but having them use it is what is the key, right? So it's the whole you do, we do, I do. At the end, they need to be able to identify that feeling. So whether it's a chart, whether it's a list, whether it's like visually with colors and pictures, you all know what works best for your students. So throwing that into any type of lesson, whether it's you could go into history, social, like life skills classes, electives. You could do it with language classes. You could do it with reading classes, science, um, all of those, anything that has to do with humans or characters. Um, I tie that back into what I'm doing right now. We're doing the Hunger Games with my kids, and they're sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. They are in their academic skills, their lexile levels are around like kindergarten to maybe third, fourth grade. I have my highest student is fourth grade reading level, and incorporating these vocab words, going from the easy ones like sad, happy, and then building that up into frustrated is a synonym for similar feelings you may be feeling, but they're actually different. And having them see the difference of, oh, so if I'm angry, maybe I am also frustrated, and they can see that there's differences in varieties of emotions. Um, that's one of my favorite things. And then the importance of incorporating opportunities. So, for example, allowing them to express how they feel when X, Y, Z. So I have a student, a particular student who he's very academically capable, but he gets in his own way. So I allow him to share how he feels when he's frustrated. I allow him to share how he feels when he doesn't want to do work. Um, and I notice when I co-teach with some of my coaches in the past and present, sometimes when they hear these kids, they think that they're complaining, or they think that they are just not having it, or they don't have the skills to work on the assignment or things like that. And for me, I notice like they're trying to express that they need help. Maybe they just don't know how to ask, but they are telling you like, I'm struggling, whether you like it or not. I don't want to do this. I'm having a hard time. So seeing it in that lens of opportunity versus an opportunity to dismiss their feelings and tell them, why aren't you working? Like, all I hear is you're saying you don't want to do it. So approaching it in a productive, proactive approach is key. And I can tell when a kid notices that from an adult who gives them that opportunity, they're more willing to work, they're more able to focus, and they feel motivated. Sorry, can you say that again?
I love this. Oh, was there a question? Okay, not sure if that was a question or just somebody was unmuted, but feel free to put a question in the chat because we couldn't quite hear you. I just wanted to say that I love this so much. It really illustrates the shift from, you know, what Tanaz was saying. It's like from redirecting kids to get back on task, seeing their feelings as disruptive, That's kind of the more traditional lens that has been the dominant lens in schools for so long. And this is shifting to mindfulness, modeling mindfulness, and being mindful of what we're seeing in our students. When we see a shift in when we see a change in their emotions, or we notice something, we can be mindful of that and then help them. And then we're addressing the underlying issues as to why they're not on task. So it's no longer that being on task and getting everything done is absolutely the most important thing. We have to be dismissive of everything else, but checking in, hey, what's going on? It sounds like you're frustrated, and allowing some space for that. And that's what will help them learn emotion regulation and build better relationships. So I love this. I think it's so huge. And I love that we are making this shift in schools. This is just really awesome. So a vocabulary list, I'm thinking if you don't have an SEL program that provides a vocabulary list for you, you could easily, what would you say, Tanaz? Google a list of emotional words, emotional vocabulary list. There's probably a lot available online.
I love
You can
Pinterest.
create your own.
Yeah, Pinterest. I would start from Pinterest and then go into Google exactly, or then just kind of explore. If you just type in SEL vocab lists, and you'll just see all different types.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. That's a great idea. So the benefits of relationship building, really so much of it starts with the student-teacher relationship. We know from research that when a student feels a positive connection with their teacher, when they feel connected to their teacher, they are going to feel more connected to their peers, more connected to the school as a whole, and more connected to the content that you teach. So it's so crucial to invest time in building relationships between you and your students, and also work on helping your students build relationships with each other, because that's going to help them all throughout life to have those positive peer-to-peer relationships. But we know that the student-teacher relationship can strengthen academic achievement. It reduces absenteeism, promotes self-motivation, strengthens self-regulation, improves their goal-making skills, and reduces your time spent on management. So investing more time in building positive, authentic relationships with your students can actually reduce your time spent on behavior management throughout the school year. So it's very much worthwhile. And I really love this chart, and I have the link to where I got it down here at the bottom. So if you want to go ahead and save the link to these Google Slides, then you can access links that we have embedded in the Google Slides as well for later on. So this is, it says building positive relationships through demonstrative caring. So relationships make us feel connected, plain and simple. We establish connection with our students when we make sure that they feel are caring, they feel cared for, they feel like they belong. And when they feel like they belong, they do better at school, they do better at life. So it is not enough to just care about your students on the inside. You've got to demonstrate that you care about them. That is what's going to make such a difference in making sure that they feel that in you. So you might feel it inside, but you've got to make sure that you are really demonstrating it and that they feel it. So think about, so this chart shows things that we want our students to feel. And when they feel these things, they are going to do better at school. They need to feel important. They need to feel noticed. They need to feel reassured and recognized, understood. They need to feel forgiven, admired, and appreciated. I tell my students in my classes, my teacher candidates, I give them this, this acronym LYSOL. and it stands for Love Your Students Out Loud. And I know love is a strong word for some people, but I'm really talking about caring, and do it out loud. Do it so that it is very obvious that you care about them. So, one kind of helpful little exercise that you can do for yourself is to think about your most challenging student, the student that might keep you up at night, right? And go through this list and kind of jot down the feelings that you guess they do not experience. Okay. So, do you think that student feels heard? Do you think that student feels appreciated? Are they feeling in control? And whatever it is that you jot down, they might feel some of these things, but then other really important things they might not be feeling. You can ask, how can I help them experience these feelings? It might be a matter of giving more choices. It might be a matter of actually giving them more responsibility, or giving them a voice. You can give students a voice by incorporating more voting, to make sure that they have, a say in what goes on, or just, checking in with them and listening and validating how they're feeling or what's going on in their lives. So I really like this graphic. I think it's kind of helpful to put things into perspective and identify maybe where we can make some changes on our end to help our students feel a better sense of belonging. And Tanaz is going to talk about the case study, talk about a couple of case studies now.
So the first case study is an overall picture, similar to the image of SEL, the breakdown from home, classroom, and then the community. So this case study breaks it down from the relationship with their caregivers, how that experience may have shifted their SEL competence, moving into how the school is supporting their SEL competence, and then their relationships with teachers, relationships with their peers, branching out into their connections with the community. How are they successful in their community? How are things going? Are they happy with those things? And then again, the macro system. So it goes into, how does poverty affect this? How does racism affect SEL barriers? It's a really interesting case study. I really wanted to share it with all of you. I think that just having this as a opening, like an introduction to SEL, is really good to read through.
And it's hyperlinked right here, so you can view that right there.
The next case study that I found, this one's a really great resource. This is one of my favorites on our webinar. The case study compilation of integrating social emotional learning into academics and beyond. So these are a variety of options that you can, when you open up the case study link, you can click on all of these hyperlinks that you see on the left-hand side. And each of them is a specific case study that all different types of teachers, K through 12, have tried with their students. And they're pretty brief. They're like a page and a half maybe, or less than that. And I'm going to talk about one of them specifically in one of our slides coming up. Case study number 3. This one has to do with currently during our pandemic. How is SEL, how are we going to reunite, renew, and thrive using SEL and reopening schools? The graphic you see here to the left, I pulled this from the case study. It's really great. It simplifies it and it gives you just a short and sweet visual of what they will cover. And it's a great resource to honestly read through now and again and maybe go back to it, because yes, we are in our pandemic right now, but our pandemic will continue to affect us with all of our students moving forward, students who will meet in the future. All of these apply. So I think that this is great to hold on to. And here are some classroom activities. So this portion of the webinar, we're going to talk about some things that you can use in your classroom starting next week if you wanted to. So the one on the left, I'm going to talk about the writing activity first with the classmate interview. So I put this together for my students. This was for my reading intervention class, and I wanted them to just focus on communicating with someone that they may haven't talked with yet before, or they may know of them in the classroom, but they haven't had a deeper conversation. So the goal here was for developing their communication skills, speaking, listening, writing, and reflecting. I paired students randomly, so I had them all put their heads down. I picked the first student and they picked a number, and I would just go off the chart and I would pair them with whichever number they picked with the students on my attendance sheet. So it was pretty fun, and they were excited already, and it was random, and I made it into a game to start out. They had the option also to either like interview the classmate. I gave them an opportunity to either, for example, they could interview at the same time, they could ask each other the same questions, or they could just go through it all the way till the last problem and then have the other student be interviewed. So there's a variety of ways that you can use this. I had created this on Google Classroom as a Google form, and students just typed in there and then they submitted it when they were finished. If you wanted to layer this activity and make it into maybe a 2, 3, 4, even like a whole week activity that they reflect back on, you could have students at the end with their data and the interview information. They could write about the person they interviewed. They could share verbally what they learned about the student, maybe like a couple highlights or their favorite thing. They can make slides about the classmate. So I thought that that was just a great way of getting them to open up, maybe find a friend that they didn't know they could be friends with, maybe find something common with someone, maybe someone that they wouldn't have particularly met on their own, right? So linking them in random but purposeful ways is what I enjoy doing, because I like seeing them interacting and finding those like, oh, because I wanted to share something with you guys. After I did this lesson, one of my students, told me afterwards, she like pulled me aside, she's like, Miss O, I can't believe so and so loves the same music that I do. Like, I never would have thought that he liked that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you never know what you find out when you talk to someone new, right? So those little moments are really satisfying, and also you can see afterwards how much more they're willing to talk to those students in class again. After this activity, they were really eager to even approach the people that they had talked to before, because you kind of like started a little bonding moment between them, which is nice to see.
Can you share some of the questions that were on
Yes. So
interview?
I'll go over here. I can pull it up real quick. Um, and I was thinking, like, if I was a student in middle school, what would I want to know about someone new in my class? I guess like I would kind of start simple and make my way into more like interesting topics. So let me see, where did I put it? Okay, so we opened up with, am I able to share this, Dr. Rowe? Can I share my screen? I'm gonna just switch it real quick.
Yeah, you should be. Let me stop mine, and you are co-host, so you should be
All
able
right.
to share.
So this is the classmate interview. Um, it started with just the instructions that I shared, and then they would type the interview interviewees information, and then it started with like, how many siblings do you have? It went into, what do you like to do on the weekends, something you can't live without. If you had 3 wishes, what would they be? What's your favorite food? What 3 words describe you best? And that was a fun one. I got a lot of hands. They were like, Miss O, like, does this count? And I'm like, well, what do you think? Does that describe you? And I'm like, why are you asking me? And they're like, yeah, like, I think this is me. So this is totally SEL. They're like trying to figure out, like, should I identify myself this way? So that was funny. Um, how do you like to help others? I love question 7 because I always want to know, if I were to give them a task, would they want to do this? So how could they be responsible with helping? What would they want to do? Whether it's at home, at school, wherever. I really get to see their personality with this one. Um, who or what makes you laugh the most? I got a lot of siblings on this one, a lot of mom and dads. Um, I heard from some people like my best friend, so getting to see who they are close to in that sense. And then question 9, are you left-handed or right-handed or both? That was a good conversation starter. So they really like that. So far, who's your favorite teacher at Warner? Do you play an instrument? And then the last question, Drake or Kanye? And then this is where they were like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, so like, we love the same. Or at the end, I put none of the above. And one of my kids was like, Miss O, why wasn't Snoop Dogg on the list? And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I'll remember that for next year. So it's a great activity. Definitely you could use it like September, October time, just to have like little icebreakers in between, and then they open up after this one too. I really saw them sharing things that they haven't shared before. So it was fun. And then if we go back
I
to,
love those. And those are super fun and like low risk, nothing too personal, just fun and able to connect with each other. And I think you could, if any of you are elementary, I think you could definitely, modify and simplify some of those questions or make it more to your grade level pretty easily. So that's great. All right. Okay. Is it showing?
yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
All right, good.
Um, And then, so on the right side, these are just more things that you can try out. I love doing like right when I open the class, I'll start with like a 5-minute meditation. I keep telling myself like I should do it, but I finally did it last week. And I just had a link to a YouTube video of 5-minute meditation. I watched it beforehand just to see how it would go. And I think that for our students, um, maybe just at least ask them if they're interested and if they would be willing to try it with you, just to kind of open up the conversation. And I modeled the entire time my meditative, like how I was sitting in my seat, how I was maybe folding my hands, or I could rest myself on my desk, and then letting them know that it's okay to keep your eyes open or closed. It's your choice. So letting them know that they have all of these choices, just making sure that they're comfortable during that time. There's also a lot of great mindfulness activities on, besides YouTube, I like to use quizzes. So I'll type that in the chat. So I'll use YouTube and quizzes for mindfulness activities. And quizzes is a great resource. Kids love it. If you haven't heard of it, it's very gamified. So there have opportunities to take any type of really activity on here, but focusing on mindfulness, they have some great video activity and reflections already built for you, and it's all for free. If you use the free version, it's great. I haven't had to use the subscription version yet, and I find a lot of these are awesome on there. Arts and crafts, a great way for therapeutic creative release. If you see that they've had a really hard week, or they've been really stressed out, or there's a student who maybe had a hard time regulating their emotions, maybe around like the day after or that Friday, to incorporate an arts and crafts activity. That's really great for their emotional release in art, or using their hands instead of having to type or write or think, doing things that take them out of their brain and let them just release is very therapeutic and cathartic. The next one, apology, applaud, awareness. I picked this out of case study number 2. So if you're looking at that one, they'll mention this in one of the case studies. I really wanted to highlight this one today. I'm going to try it with my students, and I'm excited to see how it goes. So you have everyone sits in a circle. So you'll change the seating. Everyone will sit in a circle if that's possible for you guys in your class, or you can just stay where you're seated, whatever works. And then each student either gets to share something that they wanted to apologize, something they wanted to, I would say applaud is more celebratory. So something that they were very excited to share and are very happy that that happened, or something about awareness that they had learned or that they're practicing. And I would say possibly if you could lead it, like start with what you would like to share and model how it's supposed to be shared and incorporate this. You could do it in either slide format so that they have sentence starters and they know what to look at and how to phrase it if they're stuck. And you could always go back and point to the slide and be like, oh, you're doing applaud. Let's go ahead and try this sentence starter. How would you like to share it? And that's a way to kind of just open up that relationship building in your class, open up a safe space that they're able to share. And it ties into their self-awareness of how are their behavior? How is their academic behavior? Are they noticing that they're succeeding? So that's a good check-in for you as a teacher as well. The last one, weekly powerful messages. I think that this one's great, and I've seen a lot of teachers do this, and I'm sure a lot of you may already be doing this one. Weekly powerful messages are things like, for example, you have a test coming up, and you see some students may need that extra encouragement. There are like phrases, or you could call them mantras of success. I have an affirmations book that I have in my class, so reading those affirmations of succeeding or motivating or anything that has to do with productivity, and giving them that like phrase, and then you would repeat that phrase with them, and that would be the weekly message. You would repeat that up until the test so that that builds their confidence, that builds their self-esteem. Yeah.
Awesome. And it is 10 o'clock actually.